Thank you. Good afternoon. I think, okay, I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to try and ask all of you to put away your mobile devices, except when you are asking questions through Pigeonhole. And I'm doing this because I have such an excellent panel here of excellencies. And we are only going to take about 35 minutes of your time, I promise. So we are running over a little bit, but that's because ASEAN is such a great part of our everyday life that it has spilled over in terms of the morning session. But this is a very critical panel because if you look at the title of this panel, it's about taking a look. So we're going to do a quick look into the future of jobs and skills in ASEAN. And it's not just because it's the current conversation. Is because if we look at the future of jobs and skills seriously enough, it will help ASEAN to capture business opportunities. And I'm hearing this again and again from yesterday's conversations to this morning's conversations that we must never forget the talent piece. And talent does not mean only the millennial or the young people, but also many of us who have been disrupted in our various careers and are looking to come back to new jobs. And why can't we have new jobs for people who are young at heart and people who have had great experience from previous roles but are retooling, upskilling, because the new jobs of the future can also fit them. So without further ado, I'm going to start, and this is in alphabetical order because Singapore is such a small country, everybody else is bigger than us. So in ASEAN, the three representatives from Indonesia, from Philippines, from Vietnam are just a part of that whole bigger whole. But we are delighted to have all the excellencies here with us. And I'm going to start with Indonesia. And Tommy, you know, your sterling background was amazing. 33 years in media, but now taking on this role as ambassador from Indonesia in Singapore. And I know you have 2 slides that you want to quickly show us. So perhaps we could bring up Tommy's slides and, you know, tell us a little bit about the wonderful country of Indonesia and where you think the future of jobs will be for your country, and that dovetails with the comparative advantage of Indonesia.
Thank you, Professor Enko. Thank you for inviting me speaking in the very prestigious event. Prof. N, if we are talking about the Indonesia and the global, I think in the last 2 years or even a decade, we facing a very huge, big disruption. And I think every country is trying to make an adjustment. Firstly, that we are facing the what we call the pandemic COVID-19. The second one that we know that now all the countries must be adjustment with the what we call the climate change. And the thirdly that in the last 20 years, we see that a huge ICT revolution. For Indonesia, with the country with 270 million people, now we are trying to make an adjustment also. First is because previously, in the last maybe 40 years, our development is only dependent to raw material resource. Now the government is trying to transform our economy to more become product to have a more high value added. The second one is because the ICT revolution, we would trying to bring more many people to enjoy and involve of development of technology. And the thirdly about the climate change, Indonesia is trying to also moving from the energy based on the fossil become for renewable energy. So that's why we have 270 million people, 80% of the Indonesia is young. And we have 260 million people that could be enter the workplace. So because the COVID, once again, 10% of that people is affected. Now, 5 area that the government is trying to push. First is about the how to make more entrepreneur in Indonesia. So entrepreneurship is very important. The second one is the ICT, how to make more people more digital literate and can use the technology for development and prosperity for themselves. The third is a green energy. Like I mentioned, all the countries is facing the climate change challenge. So this is the Indonesia is because we have a lot of resources from geothermal, from solar, from hydro, everything that we can optimize. The fourth one is healthcare, and the fifth is the creative industry. That's area that now the government is trying to put the concentration and focus how to develop the people.
Thank you very much. But Tommy will be very busy because all those sectors are also the sectors that are attracting a lot of attention across whole of ASEAN and also engaging our people in Singapore. So I'm going to go to you, Excellency Joseph. And for you, looking at Philippines, same question. What do you think are the comparative advantage and what would the future of jobs within the country looks like?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to the.
Um, Excellency, I think your mic, maybe the mouthpiece a little bit.
The speaker.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. Um, the Philippines has a large population, not as large as Indonesia, but we have 110 million people, and as a result, we have a large pool of workers to draw from. And in addition, it's also a very young population. The median age of the Philippine population is 25.7 years old, so relatively young. We have a large labor pool. In 2019, for example, we produced 720,000 college graduates, and therefore that's a pool for the labor force. The characteristics, the comparative advantage of that labor force would be first of all, of course, is its proficiency in English. The Philippines is the sometimes considered as the third largest English-speaking country in the world. As a result, that's an advantage in finding employment. The labor force also has a positive working attitude, very highly service oriented. As you can see, even here in Singapore, if you go to F&B and hospitality, you will encounter Filipinos who show that service orientation. Um, in addition, they're easily trainable, willing to work hard, and being young, they're also digitally savvy and technically adept. I'll give you an example of an industry that has benefited greatly from these advantages. It's the IT and business process outsourcing industry in the Philippines. This industry, which encompasses call centers, back office processing, shared services, caters to multinational companies and other companies all over the world. And it employs 1.3 million direct workers in the Philippines. And it's precisely because of these advantages of the labor force that the Philippines has become one of the largest providers of outsourcing services. Uh, so this is in service, but in even in manufacturing, it also has shown itself in one of our industries as well. The Philippines is one of the what our largest export product is, in fact, semiconductors and electronics. Last year, we exported 46 billion US dollars worth of these products. And this industry employs about directly and indirectly about 2.5 million workers. And again, based on the comparative advantages that we have. Thank
Okay,
you.
very nice. And I'll come back to you in a little while, Excellency, because you say this is the final year of your term. And I can almost be very tempted to ask you very soon, in this last year of your term, what would be some of the things you hope to see between Singapore, ASEAN, and specifically Philippines? Yeah, so we'll come to that. Excellency, and very delighted to have you here as well. I think for many of the companies in Singapore and across all the different parts of ASEAN, Vietnam is like the rising star. Yeah. So we would love to hear from you in terms of the comparative advantage and so many interests in Vietnam. What are some of the things that you think are the future of jobs would influence in terms of Vietnam's requirements?
Yes, thank you for your question. And before answering your question, I would like to remind you that last year Vietnam has started two very important documents. The first, the 5-year socio-economic development plan for period 2021 and 2025. The second, socio-economic development strategy for the period 2021-30. And these documents set out the 9 strategic pillars for the country development in the coming year. The first economic restructuring and transforming growth model. The second, expand the processing and manufacturing industry, not manual and assembly. The third, develop new technology, high-tech industrial production, and supporting industry. The fourth, focus on smart technology and digital transformation. Develop digital infrastructure, develop digital economy and digital society. The fifth, focus on applying advanced technology in agriculture. The sixth, restructure the transportation service industry, focus on waterway vehicle and railways. The seventh, restructure credit organization. The eighth, develop marine economy. And the last, develop green energy. Based on that strategic pillar, we can predict a huge demand of high-skilled technical staff and middle and senior management personnel in the 6 following sectors in the coming year. The first, in the electronic and semiconductor industry. The second, in the information and communication technology. There will be a huge demand to recruit a good personnel in the field of the artificial intelligence, AI, big data, crypto, and blockchain. And the third area in the finance and banking sector. So there is a huge demand for personnel in all levels for position of financial application development, technology development, data analytics, and digital marketing. The fourth, in the energy sector, a high demand for skilled labor in the green energy, solar and wind power is increasing. The fifth area in the marine economic sector, demand for skilled worker and technology in marine economic area such as offshore aquaculture. And the last, in the industrial real estate and leisure industry. Overall, apart from professional knowledge, the problem-solving skill and the high level of self-discipline are needed. And our advantage are I think maybe many persons may know, our workforce are very young. The 57 of our population are in the age of working age from 15 to 16 years old.
Thank you very much. This kind of set the tone. So all three of you represent countries with young population.
Yep.
Singapore's not that young, lah. Huh? So we appreciate, all right, the mileage that comes from having a young population. But I like to believe that digital is ageless. Yeah, but Tommy and all of us in this room are prettily digital in our savviness. Fine. So digital is ageless. Digital should be genderless. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. and digital should be boundaryless. So, for all three of you, given that you see so many needs for upgrading, retooling, upskilling in the whole of ASEAN, maybe I could come to each one of you again. How are you closing the gap between the need to digitalize and be green and the supply of talent, be it from the universities, from vocational institutes, what about from the rest of the economy? But maybe we could start with you. How are your skills needs being met?
First, Prof. N, Indonesia is very huge country. We are the archipelagic country. So in the last 5 years, the government is trying to put what we call the palaparing. We're trying to connecting every island, 17,000 islands, with the what very qualified and very best wireless all over Indonesia. So infrastructure is very important. We are developed that one. We are also now is trying to connect Indonesia with US. There are 3 subsea cable, fiber optic, will be put from US directly to Indonesia. So, but after the infrastructure, the most important thing is the people, how they are what we call digital literate. Now, is government is trying to upgrade the capacity of the people with vocation. We are collaborate with so many private sectors. Like last week, the President Joko Widodo met with the C Group, Shofi, and asking all the private sectors in the digital to also give a vocation to many Indonesian people. So with the upgrading the capacity, they have a competence. We can optimize the ICT revolution.
Thank you very much. I love the magic words, the triple P, the public, the private, the people partnership. And of course, private sector need to step up, even with the government investing in infrastructure and investing in human capital. What about in the Philippines, Joseph? Because all of you, the strength of the Philippines, the English language, the proficiency, all the other ASEAN countries would say you will be able to leapfrog us. But even then, I think there are skills gaps to be closed within the country.
Thank you for the question. Uh, in June of last year, the president signed an executive order called the National Employment Recovery Strategy. It basically adopted that strategy as the master plan for recovering the labor markets, for restoring the labor markets. Because what has happened was, I think, as every other country has been affected, the Philippines unemployment level had been brought down to as low as 5.2% in 2019. But unfortunately, because of COVID, it had shot up to 10.3% in 2020. As a result, the main objective, obviously, of the government is to try to restore that employment level. And by 2021, we were actually able to recover already to cut down the unemployment level to about 6.2%. But nevertheless, the mandate was still to restore the jobs and in fact, expand. So one of the key mandates under that master plan was to have tie-ups between the private sector and government to reskill and to upskill the current employees so that they can become more digitally capable. And one example of such a initiative was with Microsoft, where the government partnered with Microsoft to upskill 800,000 government employees and 5,000 students to develop their digital skills so that they can become more able to meet the future employment needs. The other initiative is there is a tripartite working arrangement between government, academe, and the private sector to try to improve the curriculum of the universities in order to produce graduates that will be more capable of meeting the future needs and future jobs. And but aside from just the universities, there is also work within the senior high school level on the technical and vocational level, so that they will also get the necessary skills, not necessarily at university level, but enough for them to be able to find work immediately, even if they do not proceed to university.
Mm.
So those are two key areas. But the third key area, of course, is MSMEs. Philippines, the labor jobs provided by MSMEs account for about 90%, 95% of all jobs. So it is very important for MSMEs to be able to transition to the digital economy. And the Department of Trade and Industry in the Philippines is leading the effort through the Digital Transformation Initiative for MSMEs, where they provide all the necessary assistance, training, in order to prepare the MSMEs to be able to go online, do e-commerce, and be able to make use of all of the platforms that are out there where they can market their products and their produce to a wider market.
Very nice. So I would love to repeat the question for you, Ambassador Mai, but there is a question that's specifically for you from my pigeonhole. So I'm going to go to that first, yeah? So for Ambassador Mai, how do you think Vietnam compares as a talent outsourcing location to countries like China and India?
So I think China has a very huge workforce, and Indian also, but with very very well on IT skill. The Vietnamese workforce, as I tell you, still young and committed by foreign investors for being hardworking, quick e-learning, and acquiring a new knowledge. But today only 26% of our workforce are skilled labor, while 74% is unskilled with no certified training. So I think in our two socio-economic development document, we set out the highlight. We set out the importance to build a high level workforce. So to achieve this target, we focus on first more investment by university and vocational school on the strategic area as set out in our strategic document. The second, encourage upskilling and reskilling of the worker through the source courses and vocational training. We aim of 75% of our workforce to be trained, and of which 40% with certified training by 2030. And the core skill is the technical skill, soft skill, IT skill, and foreign language. Because our worker, I think, is very limited in IT skill and foreign language.
Very nice. And I wish I had a longer time with all of you because the questions are coming in fast and furious. All right. But I'm going to do the last round because I promised everyone, all right, that we would actually let everybody go off by 1 o'clock for lunch. So my last question is very simple. I'm going to start with you, Ambassador Joseph. Then I'll go to Mai, and then I'll come to Pat Tommy. Yeah. So given that you've spent 3.5 years in Singapore, and you saw the developments of ASEAN pre-COVID, right smack in COVID, and now hopefully on greener grass and pastures. What are some of the things that in your mind ASEAN could do bigger and better for our human capital, our over 650 million human capital in the region? What can we do better in terms of maybe remote workforce? What can we do better in terms of sharing of information and knowledge between family-owned businesses in the region and our entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their businesses outside of the confines of their own country? We'll love to hear your thoughts on this.
I think definitely the um, COVID has disrupted a lot of things, and it has made it even more difficult to physically be in different countries to travel to them. So, as a result, I think, as we have heard during this whole discussion this morning, a lot of the movements has in fact been moved digitally. So a lot of transactions are now done digitally. A lot of meetings are, of course, all virtual. So I think moving forward, that will continue. I think that it's still going to be uh, difficult for free movement of people, not only because restrictions remain, they will slowly go away. But I think what will happen is it's still difficult for free movement of labor across the different countries in ASEAN. So the best way, I think, where we can make use of the talents of the different countries in ASEAN, different labor force with their different comparative advantages, really would be to make use of digital. And for example, as I mentioned, the IT BPO industry in the Philippines, for example, is already making use of that. It's an industry that relies purely on working in the Philippines, but doing all the work which can be sent back and forth through digital means. And it includes architectural, engineering works that's being done in the Philippines that can be sent to Singapore or any other locations in the world. So the worker doesn't have to be physically present in Singapore or any other country. They can be at home, they can be with their families, but they can still be able to work and produce and earn a higher income probably than they would otherwise be earning if they were just working purely locally. So I think that is something that I see will probably become more prevalent in the years to come.
Very nice. And one more question for you. So, in your last 3.5 years, when Singapore companies go and see you, what are their requests?
Actually, over the years, there's been a lot of interest in investing in the Philippines. A lot of companies have come to us, Singaporean companies, interested to look at the Philippines, to invest, to even MSMEs have been interested because they want to open restaurants, they want to open small retail outlets. So doesn't have to be huge companies. Of course, the GICs and the Kepals of this world are also investing in the Philippines, but even the smaller ones. So we've been actually holding business summits, business forums with SBF as our partner to entertain, to bring companies from Singapore to the Philippines.
Thank you very much. All right, and we'll come to you, Ambassador Mai. I'll finish with Ambassador Tommy.
Yes.
So for you, in your role as ambassador representing Vietnam, what are some of the things you would like to see coming out from Singapore and the region, the ASEAN region?
So I think the ASEAN cooperation on the labor, I think, has been going on very well over the past decade, with the joint effective effort made in areas labor market, information system, skill development, skill recognition, and promotion of productivity of worker. And I think also there is still room for cooperation to ensure the smooth transition to the future work of the region. The advanced economy, I think, could be in R&D initiative, future talent training for the region, improving the institutional capability and infrastructure base for education and vocational training, while the less developed country can contribute in terms of supplying the labor force and enabling the free flow of skilled workers. And I think for Vietnam and Singapore has been the first investor in Vietnam for the last 2 years and the second this year. So we encourage the cooperation on labor training between Vietnam and Singapore and more investment of Singapore to Vietnam.
Very nice. Thank you. And just now you were mentioning to our minister, Mr. Gan, earlier, that you also see yourself as a source of energy solar, wind, to
Yes.
be exported to here as well.
Yes. Yes.
Very good.
So I think we have a high potentiality on renewable energy. I think in 2030, I think 43% of our energy will be the renewable energy, with wind and solar. So we hope the two countries can cooperate on the carbon trading, and we also could sell the green energy to Singapore in the future.
Thank you very much, Excellency Mai. And now, last but not least, Pak Tommy, this is how many months already that you are the new ambassador from Indonesia?
I enjoy it.
You're enjoying it so much you forgot how many months. So in your current role, all right, pivoting from private sector to wearing your ambassador hat, what do you hope to see achieved in terms of the bigger, better ASEAN being here in Singapore?
Prof. N, Professor Kishore Mahbubani mentioned that the most safest and peaceful region in the world at the moment is ASEAN. In the last 40 years, we are very fortunate. All the 10 countries of ASEAN can develop and very fast. Vietnam, the Philippines, have 10 countries is developed very fast. The second one, Prof. N, that we must understand, ASEAN is a one. We are a huge market with 600 million people. And our GDP is not small, 2.5 trillion US dollars. So what we are needed now, sometimes we must compete each other, but sometimes we must cooperate. If we can make it, the two of them, sometimes we can cooperate, sometimes we are compete, and we can prosper together. If the 10 countries, the 10 countries can sharing of the science and technology, exchange the expertise, exchange the experience, exchange the best practices to specific need, we could be growing is more higher. And all the 10 countries and 600 million people, ASEAN, still can be benefited. This is that we could do. But I'm sure, Prof. N, that we can do that. Why? Because of the leader. We are in ASEAN. We have already agreed in the last ASEAN summit on 26 June 2020. All the 10 countries agreed to declare the human resources development for the changing world of work. And now all the leaders will be met and will decide the vision of the ASEAN after 2025. We have agreed to have an ASEAN economic community, and after 2025, all the leaders will be decide what kind of vision of the ASEAN for the future.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I didn't discuss with Pak Tommy that he should speak last. I didn't know he was going to be so passionate about this, but I know all my excellencies are. And I think the onus is on all of us in the audience, online and on site right now to embrace the diversity in ASEAN. So that's my first D. There's so much diversity, and yet we are all united with one common destiny, as my good friend Kim Huat said earlier. And to do this right, I think the other two Ds are critical. Digitalization is a common D that we are hearing again and again, and decarbonization is the other common D that I'm hearing repeated on and on this morning, because both our future generation of talent and our future generation of consumers demanded it of all of us. So ladies and gentlemen, can we put our hands together and thank my D&D panel? Thank you.